Afternoon, everyone. Is Asia Lotta, and thank you so much for joining us for the online Minerals to Metals forum hosted by the Southern African Institute for Mining and Metallurgy. Just some quick housekeeping side before I hand over to the panelists. In the discussion, please type your question in the Q&A section in the toolbox at the bottom of your screen. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session where we can address these questions. You may also raise your hand at that time to speak to the panelists directly. Please note that this forum is recorded and will be made available to the public. If you would like to remain anonymous, please change your name by hovering name, and I think the link is more and it gives you to change your name, or you could just throw questions in the Q&A section. If you have any issues and would like to be like to be added to the mailing list, please send me a private message in the chat. And without further ado, because I can see my dog is going to start howling again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today and hand over to Georgette Barnes, who will get us started, and thereafter we will have Thandazile Moyo chair the session. Thank you much, Georgette.
Thank you very much, Aisha. I am just going to say briefly a few comments about AWIMA. AWIMA is the Association of Women in Mining in Africa, which is a network of African women in mining, oil and gas national associations. It was created in August 2015 under the auspices of the African Union Commission. So our key mandate is to advocate for women working in the sector all over the continent. And how do we advocate effectively? We can only be effective if we have the necessary data, we have the necessary information. So that is why a discussion on this topic is so key and necessary for us to undertake at this time in our journey towards empowerment of women in the mining sector. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the session as I hand over to our moderator for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgette, and welcome everybody once again. As you might have noticed that we have quite a packed schedule today. We have quite a large number of panelists for this session, and we hope to make the most of it. So to get us started, I will introduce our panel, and I will not get into the details of their accolades. I'm hopeful that you can find that on our social media pages, and you would have seen it when you signed up for this webinar. In no particular order, we have Esther Harris, who is with Murdoch University. So I will just introduce them by their affiliates. We have Dr. Doris Burr and Blair Rutherford from the University of Carleton. And we have Vanessa from Development Gateway, Hope from the UNDP Uganda, and Fundiswa Ndaba from the Minerals Council South Africa. And to kickstart our session, we will start off with Doris and Blair coming in together in this particular conversation. Doris and Blair are doing some work on gender and ASM, focusing on several countries in Africa, which would be Kenya, Sierra Leone, Mozambique, DRC, Rwanda, and Uganda. So they will give us some insights on some of the work that they are doing, looking at connecting results from research on the gender dimensions of ASM and the gender context of global resource governance with mining communities. Doris and Blair, I will hand over to you. You are going to share some slides with us, and I did promise to be quite tight on my timekeeping today, so you have 10 minutes to tell us about the work that you're doing.
Great. Thank you very much, Thandazile, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Let me just try to find our PowerPoint here. Here we are. Yeah, voila, I'm going to share our screen. So as you mentioned, this is a kind of a very brief discussion of research Doris and I have been doing with a number of colleagues, both in Canada, but also in different African countries. So I'm going to very briefly talk about those our partners and the research, and then I'll turn it over to Doris to talk a little bit more about methodological issues coming up from our research. So we had a project in the DRC, Eastern DRC, Uganda and Rwanda, looking at empowerment challenges and possibilities for women in artisanal small-scale mining, working with colleagues at Carleton, the NGO called Partnership Africa Canada, now called Impact, as well as DraftBack, a research unit in Kampala. And we looked at 2 sites, gold and 3 Ts, the tin, tungsten, tantalum sites in each country. The other project we're going to be talking about is what we call state building and women's livelihoods in ASM, which again, working with the colleagues in Canada, but also with Joanne Lebert, who now is from Impact, the lead, the executive of Impact. Also Aisha Ibrahim, Sarah Kenyan-Dewey from University of Nairobi, Mombasa, and Joao Colasso from University of Eduardo Manad, and that's in Sierra Leone, Kenya, and Mozambique. This project focuses on artisanal gold mining sites in each country. And building on that, we have another research project that now starts working also with some NGOs in Africa, in the 3 countries, in Sierra Leone, Kenya and Mozambique, but also working with GIZ. And this is trying to kind of bring the results from our research project back to the mining communities and back to the policymakers. So we're going to talk about both the kind of the research and research dissemination. So I'm now going to turn it over to Doris while I switch over here.
Thanks, Blair. So thanks everybody for being here. It's really a privilege and it's very exciting for us to have a chance to participate in this forum. So we are going to be very brief. So at the end of the presentation, I'll post up our email addresses and a website that we have where you can download copies of our papers and any research that we have. And if there's anything that you can't get access to and would like, please email us and we'll happily send it to you. So the starting place for our research, which is actually the starting place for our meeting today, which is that there has been this tremendous surge in interest in projects by donor governments and agencies, but also this burgeoning transnational policy space on resource extraction, primarily in continental Africa, because that's our interest today. And it's all trying to promote and have more interest in women working in and impacted by mining. And this was very different from where we started in 2013, 2014, where there wasn't a lot of conversation about women in mining. There was some. And what we found in our research was that there tends to be 2 kind of really profound dominant framings of women in their relationship to artisanal and small scale mining. And that is that women are either seen as primarily victimized by mining, primarily suffering sexual violence or exposing themselves or their children to harm. So that's one, and that one acts as a real gravitational pull in policy framings. And the second is that women can be included in ASM formalization, but in ways that will very sort of easily lead to women's empowerment, which doesn't kind of trouble the spaces in which ASM formalization as a policy is unfolding, and the kinds of gendered organizing of artisanal mining sites, but also the gendered organizing of policy that impact on how women will be empowered within artisanal mining. And so what we felt was that there was a real missing recognition of the complex ways in which women are actively currently involved in mining and mining supply chains, and also the different constellation of interests that are organizing around the promotion of women in ASM. And we wanted to take a closer look at that. And so that's where the research comes in. So moving to the next slide, just a quick overview. Blair, could you move the next slide? Great. So we've been using mixed methods. So in the first project, it was really mixed quantitative and qualitative methodologies. So we did a survey of almost 900 people across 7 different mine sites in the 3 countries. That's DRC, Rwanda, and Uganda, that project, which is now completed. We also did focus group discussions. So we ended up involving over 400 women and men miners and community members in focus groups. We did life histories of individual women and men. And then we did participant observation over 6 mine sites. In the second project, we continued with mixed methods, but here it was just qualitative mixed methods. And it was comprised primarily of participant observation in a mine site in each of Kenya, Sierra Leone, and Mozambique. So what we did for participant observation is that Blair or I or some of our students, Aluka Otieno in Kenya or Sarah Katz-Levine also in Kenya, would go into the mine site in each of those, in each country for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, often 3 to 4 weeks. And we did that over 3 to 4 years in each of the 3 sites. And so in that process, the researcher, whether it was Blair or Aluka or Sarah, would go each day to the mine site more or less and spend time just hanging around, interviewing people, participating in the mining activities, getting a sense of how mining tasks are organized, how they're navigated by women and men, and also how they change over time. And we were really attentive to how do gender norms and gender institutions like the family or other decision-making structures shape the ways women and men do their mining work. And then we supplemented that with interviews of individual miners, of course, women and men, across all the mining roles that we could discern. But we also looked at ancillary livelihoods like women and men involved in vending. And we looked at different authority structures. So the chiefs, the land or concession owners. Often there's mining site committees that operate in individual mines, and other officials, and we would interview them, and government authorities at different scales, including transnational policy sites and civil society organizations. And then for both projects, we had report back meetings where we shared the research findings and got feedback on what the women and men miners and other community members felt about our findings. So the reason we did mixed methods, and I think it was a really important part of our findings, is that it allowed us to understand, to go beyond some very preliminary findings. I think we all now know that generally there tends to be a very gendered division of labor in artisanal mine sites, that women tend to be found primarily doing processing mining roles, and men tend to be found primarily in digging roles. But what we found was that actually women also did excavating roles, despite the fact that there were often very strongly articulated norms against women doing that, but women did in fact do it. And we often had to be in the sites for a longer period of time and talk to more women and men to find the women who were doing excavating work. We also were able to kind of get a better understanding of the diversity amongst women. And rather than treating women as a homogenous category, we were able to see that women themselves were organized along their own hierarchies, and to better understand what were the conditions that shaped how women navigated that hierarchy, what allowed some women to be able to do some roles and not others. And importantly, in this mixed method, and also the kind of the regular going back to mine sites, was it allowed us to see changes over time. And what we found was that the ways in which gender works to structure mining activities does change. Even though there's a real strong articulation that women cannot do certain roles, and we might attribute that to cultural norms. But what we found was those cultural norms actually were navigated, and they changed, sometimes from one year to the next, sometimes over longer periods. And it meant that some things that can feel very static actually are very fluid. And we also found that the ways that state officials interact with mine sites was also very, very different. Sometimes they were extracting tax from miners. Sometimes they weren't, and that changed. And so that also allows us to understand what are the conditions in which interventions in artisanal mine site are going to have to interact with states, and to understand that those can be quite variable. And finally, I think we also really need to reflect on the configurations of NGOs, of donor governments, and how their interests and articulations about women in mining sites also change. So moving on, because I see our time is up, we came up with some number of gaps, and we cannot do justice to them all, of course, today, but we think there's some huge gaps still lingering. One is that we don't really fully understand yet the interaction between family dynamics and ASM work, and that really needs to be pulled apart, because there's a lot of assumptions that are made about women and men and marriage, but also about children, and that needs to be better understood. And going to the final slide, because I'm running out of time. I just want to make sure everyone sees that here's the website, and I guess we can circulate this. If you want more information about our findings, then please get in touch with us, and we can happily share reports.
Thank you very much.
There.
Thank you very much for that, Doris and Blair. I will come back to you with some questions, but for now, I just want to link some of the points that you made to our next speaker, Hope, who is with the UNDP. Hope, I will start you off with a question just to link the work that the UNDP is doing in the space with the work that's being done by Doris and Blair, looking at the aspects to do with gender-based violence. So what information are you guys gathering around gender-based violence, and how are you perhaps using that to influence your development programs? If you could just spend 90 or so seconds answering that question, then I'll come back to you with your slot to speak.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon from Kampala. Actually, Blair raised a very good point about some research gaps. If I start from there, I'm happy to inform you that we did an extensive study about women ASM miners, and how they interact with their families and communities. So we'll be happy to share the details. But back to your question, Stanley. Interestingly, just to inform everyone, the UN family globally is implementing what we know as the Spotlight Initiative to eliminate violence against women and girls. And UNDP is a partner alongside other UN agencies, of course, with the host governments. And it's interesting to share that from Uganda, we included a component specifically targeting and addressing GBV, but utilizing a livelihood strengthening approach. So what we did, of course, is based on baseline studies we've done, but also specifically based on the insights that we are getting from our usual work in extractive sector and mining specifically. We're able to really pin down other contributors alongside other contributors to GBV around women. We found that women in mining were largely excluded from the referrals pathways, community support initiatives. Most ASM sites were out of the catchment of any technical support and help by service providers. So that's one thing I can share about the data we are collecting from the Spotlight Initiative. It's all our reports are also online. You could go and read through on what we are doing about it. But specifically for GBV and mining, we are really focusing on how women economic empowerment can actually be a tool to really cast them in a light where they are viable, productive community members, where they are able to secure their incomes and livelihoods, but also how best we are linking ASM sites and to the community and existing referral pathways.
Thank you, Hope. So now you'll just get into talking to us about some of the work that the UNDP is actually doing in terms of general data on women in mining and how you're using this to influence some of your development programs. You've already touched on that when you spoke about the Spotlight program, looking at how it's influencing some of your programs around gender-based violence, but on a broader overview, just the programs that are going on under the UNDP and the information that you're gathering and how that is passed along further to influence policy and development.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Given the time limits, we do so much, of course, in the mining sector that is really cutting across, supporting policy formulation, policy reviews, work that is really delving deeper into how are women participating in mining, and how best can we enhance that participation for equitable benefit. I think to really drive the point home, I'll single out one piece of work as a case study that I can now deeply share about, that really has a good example of what UNDP is doing alongside partners. It's interesting, of course, that when you talk about mining, everyone thinks gold and other high value minerals and metals, but we have, if colleagues and participants are not familiar, what we know as development minerals, these are construction materials, industrial materials. You find that, for example, in a country like Uganda, most of the people who are involved in any kind of mining activity are actually working around stone aggregates, dimension stones like marble and limestone, of course, in terms of industrial minerals. So what we did in terms of the data, the first big investment that UNDP did, alongside, of course, the European Union and the Africa, Caribbean and Pacific group of states, was really invest a lot in generating good data in terms of baseline surveys to understand the nature of this sector of development minerals, but also specifically indeed delve into the gender issues, because you find that indeed, like we found out in that study, there is a big gap in terms of what women are doing and earning, in terms of their participation, in terms of the income they are getting, but also in terms of the opportunities, because you find that many rights holders, many capital owners are actually not women, so they are getting so little, yet we know that via research, whatever they are earning, they are really putting it back into the families and communities. So that's part of the work we did, and from that, in terms of data usage, we went ahead to design a further study, because the first baseline definitely showed a really urgent need to really develop gender-specific programming, and of course, part of that insight is what we fed into the Spotlight initiative for Uganda, implemented by UNDP, but also what I might call this specific program focusing on development minerals that is implemented by UNDP globally. You find that we went further ahead in Uganda to say, okay, since this baseline is showing us a big gap around women participation, how best can we address this? And we went ahead and invested more funding into really an in-depth study of how women participation in extractives can be enhanced, specifically in mining. And that's what I was alluding to. That report is it's almost being published. I'll be happy to share, but the insights we are getting out of that informed a design of the next step of this development minerals program. So I cannot overemphasize the need to really invest in data collection, creating a good evidence base, and with that we inform programs that are within, of course, our fort, but also in terms of other initiatives we're working along with partners in the private sector. For example, another program I can share with you that UNDP is working on in Uganda right now. It's an initiative targeting young people specifically, about how they are innovating for employment and entrepreneurship. And within that, we have also zeroed down on the gender issues to make sure that some of the silent factors we know are a block to women participating equitably in mining. For example, the access to technology, the need for flexible working hours, their safety and health needs on site and off site. How is the situation at home? That's why I was sharing a lot of what we are talking about, linking them to really the community and referral pathways for GBV and support. We are doing that again, utilizing a private sector approach in Uganda also, where we are really looking into business, but not only business, but how are we unlocking financing to support a lot of the innovation. And of course, to share some insights, we are finding out more and more that actually once you invest in skilling, once you invest in access to financing, and once you invest in providing access to technologies, women can only but do so much, but they'll also definitely thrive when they're undertaking mining activity.
Thank you very much, Hope. So what I'll do now is I'll just revert back to Doris and Blair before moving on to our next speaker, Vanessa. So Doris and Blair, considering the conversation here is around a lot of information gathering, data gathering from the field in as far as women and mining are concerned, would you perhaps give some comments around how collaboration across those different areas is helping in knowledge and information sharing? This data, we cannot speak about duplicating efforts because multiple people are working in different jurisdictions to get this information. And it's really quite some time investment to gather it. Would you comment on the collaborations that are coming out of this research?
A great question, Thandazile. It was wonderful to hear from Hope on all the work UNDP is doing globally, but specifically in Uganda. And it's so important, we found in our research to collaborate with researchers, across continents. In our case, we're based in Canada and we're working with our colleagues in Africa, but not only with academics based in Africa, but with non-governmental organizations, civil society actors. And also we found with the report back meetings, which Doris mentioned, we learned a lot by presenting our findings in the mining communities with women and men miners, and they added to it, and then they went with us to talk to policymakers and civil society activists and actors in both the district level and at the national level, and it was very important. We found that for the policymakers and even some of the national civil society leaders to hear from some of the different women miners and man miners, to hear about their problems and so forth. And I think it's really important to that the knowledge is shared, so it's not simply done by academics or simply done by donors or simply done by government policymakers, but you have collaborative efforts to not only raise the various issues facing women artisanal miners in our case, but also to find pathways forward to work collaboratively. So yeah, we strongly support and try to practice that ourselves.
Thank you very much for that, Blair. So Vanessa, I will move over to you now and ask you to tell us a bit about the work that Development Gateway is doing with Women in Mining Guinea Index.
Hello, thank you very much, and hello to everybody. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this panel. So the Women in Mining Guinea Index was a project that we were fortunate to, we had an opportunity actually that was unprecedented, because we were conducting a more general feasibility assessment in Guinea, through which we actually met with the Women in Mining president at that time, who shared that she had the idea to develop an index that can be used to really know what is the issue with such a low level of women in the extractive sector. So we decided that maybe we could join forces and help. And because we actually got involved after the project started, we decided to go for a pilot only, because we obviously will not have been having the time to develop a full-blown country index. And the main objective was basically to see what is it exactly, like what is it that we can find at country level that will be able to give us the information that we want, or let's say to actually give stakeholders the opportunity to ask the right questions, whether we're talking about government agencies or development partners and etc. So, and the pilot, we said that we wanted it to be enough to showcase the relevance and the importance of such a tool, so that we can find like sustainable solutions to women issues, agreeing to the fact that they differ from one country to another, even though what we found in Guinea is pretty much similar to Senegal and to other countries in the West Africa region. So we asked Women Guinea to come up with 6 priority sectors or teams that they would like to see involved, included in that pilot phase, which they did. They wanted us to see the government, let's say, implication and commitment to really address gender issues, whether it's in the legal framework or other strategies promoting the inclusion of women in the sector. What is the private sector doing? So in Guinea, it's mostly a mining sector. We're not have oil and gas, or it's very minimal. But what are the mining companies doing either to attract more women to their workforce or to empower women in the communities, keep them in school, etc.? What are CSOs doing? And do CSOs even have access to data that will help them for their advocacy or trigger any national debate on women issues at all? Then we wanted to know a little bit about the women's empowerment and the woman's role in the community, because we had all the dynamics of the social cultural context that needed to be included in there, and then the health education. So we developed with Women Guinea some questionnaires, and we actually had some interviews with government agencies, donor partners, CSOs, and the communities itself. I found some interesting findings, actually, some things that were not in line with what I've heard before, or there may have other reasons. And one thing that was surprising was that we were not able to find any official statistics on how many women are we talking about when we're talking about women in mining. We do not have official figures for that. I've heard, and I think a lot of us have heard, that we have a low education level in mining communities because the little girls drop out of school. That's not the only reason. There is another reason, is that teachers actually who are affected to those areas leave this area to go to like mining activities because they think it's more lucrative than their teacher job. Another thing that we have found out is that women themselves are the one who refuse some corporate opportunities because of the marital status, because they don't want to leave their husband, their kids, they don't want the husband to take a second wife, et cetera, et cetera. And the young lady who go into prostitution is because they need to make a living and there are no other alternatives that are available to them. So this is basically what they do. And as far as statistics on health also is concerned, that was another very big surprise. No statistics were collected on health or pathologies in the mining communities. So those were very, very interesting for us to find out. And so based on that, we calculated kind of each of those teams that I cited had some variables, and the goal was to come up with a score for each of those variables. And those variables actually cumulated will give us a score for the 3 localities that were included in this exercise. It was a bouquet. So as far as minerals are concerned, gold, diamond, and bauxite. So the Women Guinea, so we actually did all this through a participative approach with Women Guinea that ended up being not only a great partner, but a great partner, but also a great resilience factor, in the sense that when the data collection was scheduled, the country was facing political instability. So there were riots, people were not come to the office. And if it were not for Women Guinea local representative in country, we will not have been able to collect data that we wanted to collect for this pilot phase. So it was a great, something that we actually do a lot in Development Gateway, and see how we can have local partnerships with CSOs and actors on the field for many reasons. And this is a perfect example of how, if it was not for Moyo Guinea, we will not be here today, and I will not have anything to showcase at this point. So the pilot we did, and we actually put the results of the pilot, translated it in a graphic interface, which is a web page that's available online. And what we hope to do from here is to have the chance to develop in Guinea a full country index, and also have some kind of a toolkit of a similar efforts that can be replicated in the West Africa region, in the Africa region, and really in any region that will be interesting in having this data. And I just wanted to end on a little anecdote with an experience that I had with a civil society organization who's really involved in gender issues. And the lady asked me, what type of data should we be collecting from enterprises, from private companies, when it comes to gender? And my response to her was, what are you trying to do? What is your real objective? Are you focusing on environment? Do you only want the human resources statistics? I think those are very limited, and it's definitely not enough to seriously tackle those issues. Do you want to see how women are empowered? Do you want to see if their health is taken care of? I mean, what is it that you want private companies to do? And then I will be able to direct you towards the data that I think could be collected for that. And she didn't have an answer. She said, I want everything and anything, nothing and everything. And what I was like, I completely understand where you're coming from, because usually this is the case. We want everything and nothing at the same time. But I think moving from data collection to data use may not be something that's very easy, or that's perfectly linked, like 1 + 1 = 2. And I think definitely the objectives and the goal that we have in country should definitely be at the basis of defining what type of data do we want to use, do we want to collect, and how are we going to use it to have an impact at country level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for those insights. That's quite interesting. So basically, one needs a very clear methodology and clear needs and end user intentions from the onset. I will not ask you a question right now, but I will ask you to respond to questions that are being posted on the chat platforms. And I'll ask all panelists to just keep reading through and responding to questions as they come. And to the attendees, please remember to post your questions on the Q&A section, on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Then the panelists will respond as they go. I will move over to Esther. Esther, we have had quite a bit about data collection and how this data is used and the methodologies being used to gather this data. Would you perhaps talk to us around the development of a database and perhaps what data you are using in that database and lessons to be learned on around sustainability in that regard? Sorry.
Thank you, Thandazile. Yes, of course. And thank you very much for inviting me onto this panel. It's a great honor. And firstly, I would just like to acknowledge that I live and work on Wajak Noongar Boodja, the lands of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm very excited to be following Vanessa's presentation because the WIM Guinea Index is a project that I'm really interested in and have been following for quite a while with great interest because it was developed in partnership with WIM Guinea and responds to their stated needs for research and data And so I'm really interested in that because this is the main focus of my research. That is a very small PhD project, but that one that considers process to be as important as outcomes. And my project is, I'm working on my PhD research project in collaboration with some of the members of Women in Mining of West Africa, the Women in Mining Association, that is a regional network of WIMs from the West African Regional Economic Community. The project is an action research project, and more specifically, feminist participatory action research, which places women, gender and power at the center of the research. It's collaborative, reflective and responsive. The purpose of the research is to explore the processes of designing and implementing an advocacy tool. And there was no initial requirement that that advocacy tool be a database. What was important was to respond to the self-defined priority of women in mining West Africa. And it really echoes what Vanessa's already said about making the research work for the people that you want to work with, and that the research is intended to benefit. The research has two components. So after many discussions with members of WIMAWA, there was expressed a desire to have a sex desegregated database detailing women's participation in mining in West Africa. Now that is a massive task, as Vanessa's already been explaining, and as Hope also was mentioning in the ASM space, and Doris and Blair before her. However, we're just starting very, very small and creating a pilot project that will just be initially focused on large-scale mining. And in fact, in response, it's interesting to come after Vanessa's comments just now that the one approach that we did discuss and has been decided on for the pilot project is to interrogate mining companies with a survey. Interrogate's probably not the right word. Inquire after participation in companies, mostly because women in mining associations that we're working with in West Africa do interact a lot with mining companies, and they do have quite pointed questions to ask. And having a database or some data on some statistical foundation to back up their advocacy work is something that is very interesting to them. And so that was what they were really interested in doing. And so we've been working on a way of doing that. And in that, the PhD research has two components. So the creation of a database is one component. That is not actually what my PhD is focusing on in terms of an outcome. But my research is focusing on the process of producing such a database, and that is more to do with the context of the project, the methodology, expected outcomes, challenges, and implementation learnings, and really focusing on the process of women working together to produce an advocacy tool that responds to their priorities that they define themselves. The research responds to a call in mining and development literature for inquiry into diverse experiences of mining in specific contexts. As Doris mentioned, the awareness within academia, industry, civil society is growing at pace. Cases have been made, studies, interventions, policies are being implemented for women working within and alongside mining. And women are networking and representing their own interests within the industry as never before. So at the same time, by using participatory design, I'm recognizing that research, just like mining, can be extractive. And so I've adopted the framework that aligns with knowledge co-creation rather than knowledge extraction. And I realize I've already run out of time. So just quickly, a survey that is being tested at the moment that we've adapted from the Western Australian Chamber of Mines Company Diversity Survey, but being adapted for piloting in Burkina Faso and Niger initially, is underway, and future discussions will be centered on linking to other studies and data that will make the database more dynamic and to harness work that's already in the public domain, in hopefully to create more of a repository for existing data, which will hopefully allow WIMOR to increase the scope beyond the large-scale mining sector. I'll leave it there, Thandazile, because I think I've run out of time. My time has gone over 5 minutes already.
Yes, you have. Thank you. I couldn't help it but to keep listening there, Esther.
I'm sorry.
No, that's quite some interesting work. I like the idea of knowledge co-creation that you're speaking to, and hopefully you will touch on that again in your closing remarks. Just in the interest of time, I would want to move over to Fundiswa. Fundiswa, we have had quite a bit of what's happening in this organization with different research and it's all further up Africa. Perhaps you can give us through the lens of what's happening in Southern Africa, using South Africa as your case study. You are with the Minerals Council of South Africa. So give us an overview of the data collection efforts being made in South Africa and how you are using this to influence policy as well.
Thank you, Thandazile, and thank you for giving the Minerals Council an opportunity to participate in this webinar. August, which ended 2 days ago, is basically Women's Month in South Africa, so this webinar also comes at a very significant time for us. As you've stated, my task today is basically just to give an overview of the efforts made in collecting data on women in mining in South Africa, as well as how this data is actually then used to influence policy and practice. So data is basically collected by 3 main entities in South Africa, which would be the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, which is our main regulator. Data is also then collected by the Department of Employment and Labor. And the Minerals Council has also taken it upon itself to also collect data on employment equity, which will then include numbers and percentages on women in mining. The Minerals Council accounts for about 70% of the workforce in the industry, so it also gives quite a bit of a good representation of what's happening in the industry. So the data that is collected by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, so on a quarterly basis, companies or mining right holders are required to submit the data to the DMRE. This data is then is basically given, so they provide total numbers as well as the percentages of women employed by that relevant mining right holder, as well as its contractors. And then in March 2020, so this was the first time that Mining Charter 3 reports were actually due by mining right holders. This report also then went into a little bit more detail, which the mining right holders had to specify the number of women and the percentage of women employed at every occupational level. And the occupational levels that we focus on is from junior mining to executive mining, as well as board members. So that's the data that's collected by the DMRE. The second data collectors are the Department of Employment and Labor. They collect data on an annual basis from all designated employers, which would include mining right holders. And this data is also provided or must be presented at occupational level, so from junior management to executive management. The third data collectors, which is ourselves, the Minerals Council. So the Transformation Department also collects data every 2 years. So we look and we collect and analyze data on all transformational elements, which would include employment equity. And in the employment equity data, we will then have the numbers and detail about the women in the sector. So we'd have that kind of data as well. And basically, how would this influence policy? So in 2018, when Mining Charter 3 was being discussed and negotiated. So we used the employment equity data, both from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, as well as from the Department of Employment and Labor, to highlight what the current status was in terms of the numbers and percentages of women in mining. And this allowed us to negotiate targets that were both stretched, but also realistic in terms of what could be achieved over a 5-year period. So mining right holders also needed to then submit a 5-year plan in terms of this is where they were in terms of the employment equity data and how they were planning on achieving these targets within the 5-year period. And then in terms of just the Minerals Council, so the Minerals Council and its members have also focused on women in mining more specifically over the past 18 months. We're developing a strategy, an industry-wide strategy on women in mining, which will focus on increasing the number of women in the industry. So we're looking at attraction as well as retention. And we're obviously looking at this from, at every occupational level, but I think our focus is at junior and executive management. Junior because the targets are much higher for junior management, and also at senior management or executive management, the pool is much thinner, but the target is also quite significant for women at that category. Our other strategic focus areas are looking at ways to address gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the workplace, looking at diversity and inclusion, as well as strategies to accommodate women. So how do we have more appropriate PPE and lavatories for women working underground? And just looking at some of the numbers, in 2019, women accounted for 12% of the workforce. And this is, showed very slow progress when you look at what it was in 2008. So the number is sitting at 6%. So what we can see is that mining is still one of the least gender diverse industries in the country. However, there is focus on this, and in some areas it is promising. So at senior management levels, women accounted for about 17 to 25%. And we have a long way to go. I mean, women account for 51% of the population and approximately 40% of the economically active population. So Mining Charter 3 has started to introduce some of these targets in terms of employment. So in terms of the employment targets, but it's also started to introduce targets for under the procurement level, where we're looking at having more suppliers or women-owned and controlled companies participating in the supply chain of the industry. So we do have a long way to go, but there is a greater focus. And I think if we work smarter and harder, we're able to then attract more women into the sector and also afford women, better opportunities to thrive in their careers. So I think that's where we are in terms of South Africa. And yeah, I see also my time is up, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Fundiswa. I'll just have I have one camping question to you, which is to ask what strategies are in place, not just to bring women into and attract them into the mining sector, but more to encourage their participation at decision-making level, because it's one thing to have them in the sector, but as long as they're not involved in the decision-making, it's unlikely that we will get more women coming into the sector, because decision makers are not necessarily aware of the needs of women when they come into the sector.
So I think one of the things is we've gotten a lot of support from senior and from CEOs within the industry who are actively working towards attracting the women into the industry. But we're also looking at diversity and inclusion policies within the industry, as these would then help us understand exactly where the gaps are and how to ensure that women at those decision-making levels are better able to participate.
Thank you very much for that. We have just about 5 minutes before our session closes, and I think most questions have actually been answered on the chat platforms. So rather than going to repeat any answers that have already been given, any responses that have already been given, what I'll do is take this opportunity to give each panelist maybe 90 seconds to give me their closing remarks, like a burning issue in closing. So I will follow the sequence in which I started the discussion, and I will start with you, Blair. 90 seconds to give me your closing remarks. Just give us the burning issues that you still feel you should not leave the session without speaking to.
Thanks, Thandazile. It was a great session, and I learned a lot. And the importance, I think, which was echoed by a number of speakers, is to look for these collaborations. Esther talked about co-creation of knowledge. It's important to work not only cross-sectorally, but also to forge those networks of knowledge sharing, which includes also in women miners. This was drawn out in Hope's talk, as well as Vanessa's talk about the importance of attending to what women are experiencing, and to enlist them and enroll them not only as collaborators, but to be listening to them and what their concerns are and what their challenges are, and to come work creatively to find ways to assist them both economically, but also in their social lives. That's my 90 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blair, and thank you for sticking to the time there. Doris, your 90 seconds starts now.
Thank you, and thanks to all the presenters. It's been fabulous, and I've been madly taking notes. This is a really wonderful forum and really, really invigorating. So my two quick takeaways would be to echo Blair's comment and to say one thing that we found in our feedback sessions is that women and men miners are incredible advocates on their own behalf, incredibly learned. They really understand mining and incredibly articulate. And so the education levels, which I think is an issue that was raised, can be quite high actually in artisanal mine sites. And so artisanal miners are important partners in any knowledge creation. Second, I would also urge, I think it's really important that we have statistics about numbers of women in the sector, but we also need to go to the next level, which would be to try to figure out how we capture the impact of women's mining work on local economies, because I think it's quite significant, and probably also the impact of women's mining work on local education levels. Certainly in Kenya, and I know Monica could speak to this more than I can, women and men miners use their mining work to put their children through school. And so I think mining might actually have a very positive impact on education, which tells a different story than the one we tend to hear about. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doris, for that. I really believe and echo the sentiments that you just made. And I, for one, would actually love to see how the narrative changes as more women put their children through school, and we begin to have minors that actually have some level of education, as opposed to now where we really see ASM as poverty driven and poor education backgrounds and so forth. Hope, your 90 seconds, goodness, why am I being so generous? 90 seconds, that's now.
No, thank you. One takeaway really I would want to emphasize is that, for example, looking at the information we've been able to share right now, I would want to reassure our colleagues in the sector that there is a lot of data and information and knowledge out there. So I think let's collaborate more and share information more. I believe a lot in open data, so that you find that some of the research being undertaken sometimes is repetitive. So let's be more efficient with resources and first reach out partners, and let's talk more so that we can be able to really have more informed programming. My last bit is really to really make sure that everyone goes away with a point in their minds that it's on us to really reach out to these ladies in the mines. At the UNDP, we believe we shouldn't leave anyone behind. So let's invest resources in really delving into the issues that are affecting them. For example, the good work we've been sharing. But beyond that, let's collaborate to really design some good programs and support for these women so that we transform the mining sector.
Thank you very much for that, Hope. Let's collaborate, let's share information, let's avoid duplicating the research and utilize our resources better. Vanessa, you have your 90 seconds as well.
Thank you. You don't need to convince me when it comes to data collection and data sharing. That's my line of work. But I just wanted to piggyback on the let's say the finding that was made on the education and how education is important. Sharing an interview that I had with a Congolese lady. And I guess I was moved by when I heard that the reason she is not sending her girls to school in Congo is because they have 90% chance to come back home raped or killed if they come back at all. And that's the reason why, as a mother, she does not want to send her kids to school, which is something that I can understand completely. Just saying that there are a lot of things to be done, and we can have great text and everything, but I think also what will really work is an action plan by country that will be able to address like the basis of what the problems really are. Because for that particular woman, unless the violence issue is resolved, she will never be sending her kids to school. And this is something that I can completely understand.
Sure, that's a very somber message there, Vanessa. Thank you very much for your time. I have Fundiswa and Esther. I'm afraid I have to give you 60 seconds each. Fundiswa, I'll start with, okay, sorry, Esther, you came first. You have 60 seconds to wrap it up.
Sorry, and I just wasted 10 of them trying to turn on my microphone. Oh, that's embarrassing. I'll just very quickly say that data and data capture and data sharing are really important. I think everyone here is quite convinced of that. But equally important are the stories that are behind the data, and there's not enough people in the world, I think, working on this to capture all the stories that we need to capture to really highlight the situation for women in mining, and also for men, understanding masculinities and femininities and how they interplay in this space is something that we need more work on, and 25 PhDs won't do it. We need everyone to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Esther. Fundiswa, please close us off with your closing remarks.
No, thank you, everyone. And I think, with everyone having stated some of the most important things that I would have also wanted to share, collaboration is critical, especially when it comes to, universities and regulators, especially in South Africa, because it is a regulated environment, highly regulated environment. But I think also, looking at the future of work, there are opportunities for women and young people. And I think we should also use this to say, maybe this is what mining looked like before, but there's a great opportunity for women to now enter the space and to do extremely well in the space. And we also, need our male counterparts to come and, almost walk with us on this journey. Because I think if we continue to have women empowerment sessions where it's just women, we're losing the focus, and we're not really able to penetrate and get the men on our side. And I think in order for us to fully be integrated and in the workplace, we need our male counterparts to support and encourage us and to see the value that we bring to the table. So I think in closing, that's literally, I think those are the things that that I think we need to start looking to doing a lot more of, so that women in the sector can really truly give their very best in everything that they do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to our panelists for so much of the knowledge that they have shared with us. And yes, definitely, we need to walk this journey together. It is not just a women's journey, it is everybody's journey, and a lot more collaboration, a lot more concerted efforts towards the research, knowledge sharing, and data gathering. And well, I see a lot of PhDs and masters. This has been curved up in just this one our session, and look forward to hearing much more. We definitely have a lot more points to pick up on and chat about that. But our time is up on this session. Thank you very much to the SIMM and the Minerals to Metals Initiative for hosting us this afternoon, and we look forward to you joining us again in other sessions to come. That's from my end. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you.